From Central Indiana's #1 news source, this is Fox 59 Tonight.
Well, good evening. Thanks for joining us here on Fox 59 Tonight. Thanks for downloading the Fox 59 Now app, finding us on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe there. And if you're watching on YouTube, download the Fox 59 Now app on your smart TV if you have an Apple TV, Roku, or Fire TV. We are talking about what's happening in schools tonight after a new bill has passed, Senate Bill 1, which has a lot of impacts to governments across the state, but has a large impact on schools and school funding. It's one of the reasons why teachers were at the State House just this past Monday from a number of districts who were wanting to make their voices heard on the issue of school funding. A big deal of Senate Bill 1 includes some other bills that were folded into it. A large part of it has to do with funding charter schools, who now, for the first time, that Governor Braun has now signed this bill into law, will receive tax money from your property taxes. This is something that's never happened before. Traditional schools like IPS, Lawrence Township schools, Hamilton Southeastern, your tax dollars that you pay for where you live have been connected to the school district and where you live. And charter schools have always been left out of that mix, getting funding from other sources. But now, as of this bill, Senate Bill 1, that has now been signed into law, that changes the whole formula. That changes the game. That is good news if you are a charter school or a charter school supporter. But as you saw this week, there were a lot of people who are upset about that because the money, they say, continues to be split rather than give everybody an increase. But to talk about the who, what, where, when, and why, how we got here, and what happens next, I want to introduce you to some folks from the Mind Trust who you don't always see, but they are here in the studio. Brandon Brown is the leader of the Mind Trust, along with Vice President, right? Shannon Williams. I get the title right? Did I promote you? See, which one is a higher? COO? I think COO. Okay. Vice President's a step down. So we'll promote you to the Chief Operating Officer of the Mind Trust. And I thank you both for coming because today you two are calling for unity from people across Indianapolis, from IPS leaders, teachers, families. Because this is going to be a big change. This is something that has never happened before, and it's got a lot of people fired up for good cause. This is a huge change. This is legislation that is changing. And so with that said, we know that there are thoughts. We don't still know the full impact, and maybe you can tell us what you're hearing, but when it comes to the full impact of what this means for Indianapolis public schools in particular, Dr. Johnson had warned before that if this bill passes, this is going to lead to the closure of possibly 20 schools, and that they're going to lose multiple millions of dollars, not just because of the charter school funding, but Senate Bill 1 itself is impacting governments across the state. But with that said, Brandon, let me start with you. Where are we now that this bill is signed and now it's time to call for everybody to come together?
Yeah, well, just really, really appreciate you having us today. I think it's important to level set, right? So, one, charter schools are public schools. They have to accept all students, they can't charge tuition, and they're open to all. So, they are part of our public school system.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, right now in Indianapolis, a charter school student gets $7,900 per pupil less than their school district peers. These are the same communities, the same kids, oftentimes the same families. And at the Mind Trust, we think it's a moral imperative that every kid is worthy. And the way that we fund students right now signals to some students that they're worthy and to some students that they're not. So at the end of the day, we think it's about fundamental fairness that all public school students are funded equitably. And we think that this bill is a really good step in the right direction to get there. So what it does is not until 2028. So in 2028, a portion of local property tax resources that are currently just in the school district will be shared over time, over a 4-year phase-in, with public school students who attend a charter school.
Mm-hmm.
So we are still 7 years away from the full impact of the sharing. And that was important to us, right? This is a major change. This is major structural reform. And we think it's important for school districts to have time to be able to plan for that. The reality is that the majority of public school students within IPS attend charter schools, about 60%. The majority of Black, Hispanic, and low-income public school students within IPS attend charter schools. So this bill levels the playing field for historically marginalized students that deserve their share of local resources. The last thing I'll say is that all of those students have families who pay into the property tax system, either by owning a home or via their rent. It's taxation without representation if those families pay into the system and their students see no benefit. So I think on multiple levels, this is a way for us to level the playing field for students and to create a tax system that is more fair for hardworking families.
Brandon, we'll get into some specifics here in a moment, and I'm going to come back to the phrase taxation without representation because it's that term is being used on both sides. But I first want to ask you this: with all of this that has happened, in a way, this has turned ugly. I've seen some of the things that have been said online, and coming from both directions with this whole thing. Um, what do you make personally of what you've had to what you've been engaged in social media and things being sent to you?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a very emotionally charged few months, right? And we're in an emotionally charged political landscape right now, both locally and nationally. So, of course, bills of this magnitude are going to get a lot of responses, right? And a lot of strong opinions on both sides. What I would, though, say, maybe just to slightly reframe your question,
Mm-hmm.
is the personal vitriol has actually not been on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
been on one side.
Mm-hmm.
I am very proud, organizational, I can speak for the Mind Trust. I'm very proud how the Mind Trust has focused on the policy and has been very transparent with what we believe in terms of what the policy ought to look like. We've been very transparent about what we're going to advocate for. And nobody will be able to find a single example of the Mind Trust as an organization focusing on personal attacks over focusing on arguing about policy.
Mm-hmm.
And we think in a democracy, there should be rigorous debates about policy,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is what a democracy is all about. We don't think it is helpful or constructive to continue to create division
Mm-hmm.
via attacking people personally.
Mm-hmm.
And we're excited now that the law is in place,
Mm-hmm.
it's been signed, it is what it is,
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how can we be a constructive force
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that our public education system can move forward together and can figure out how we're going to work together,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that this is the law of the land. And we're also excited to figure out, how can charters in the school district co-create
Mm-hmm.
a system that works for all kids and create system level solutions for things like transportation, facilities, special education that can serve all kids well. Because at the end of the day, these are public school kids. They live in our community. And as leaders in the system, we got a moral responsibility to make sure that we are creating a system that works for all of them.
Shannon, let me ask you. We talked last time we talked. We were on the radio,
Mhm.
and you came in, and it was a few weeks back ahead of session, and you had said that Indianapolis Public Schools. This was something that you guys were trying to work with them on, and you weren't getting the cooperation from. I followed up with that another week later and had Dr. Johnson on the radio, who essentially said, well, I stopped coming to the table because what was being proposed, what was being asked for was something that I couldn't get behind. Now the bill is passed.
Mhm.
I asked her, it feels like a battle. It
Mhm.
feels like a fight. It feels like an us versus them. I
Mhm.
said, do you see it that way or is that just hyperbole? She said, yes, I do feel like it is an us versus them. Now that this bill is into law, as Brandon just said, it is what it is now. How do you call for unity so that everybody can work together?
Yeah, thanks for that, Cameron. It's unfortunate that the superintendent felt that way because, again, we've been very collaborative and intentionally engaged with Alicia and her top administration leaders, as well as the board, for several months, over a year and a half. So it's really unfortunate that she felt like it was an us versus them. And quite honestly, our entire efforts was to make sure that we didn't have that. We've always fostered and really yearned for a spirit of collaboration and thought partnership. So it's unfortunate, and I just want to name that. And I think now we just need to move forward. Um, as Brandon said, there's been so much contention. It's been nasty. It's been dangerous, just quite honestly.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like we're above that. Um, we need to just move forward as a community. So historically, when you look at the children that are served at charter and innovation schools, primarily students of color, primarily low income students, and then IPS has a good number of those same students.
Hmm.
So historically, people of color have been pitted against one another. We have to do away with that mentality. It's essential because as adults, we
Hmm.
have children watching us, and we're like preparing them for we're preparing the next generation of leadership.
Hmm.
And so I think, to Brandon's point, we have a moral imperative to just unify and stop the contention and the nastiness. Um, when I think about what that looks like, it means, first, quite frankly, eliminating and ceasing all the personal attacks.
Hmm.
It's just not necessary. We're rooted in facts. We're rooted in policies. We've, operated with integrity throughout this entire time frame, this entire instance, and what we've been subjected to as an organization, what we've been subjected to as individuals, is just it's not right. It's contentious and it's nasty, and it's not setting up a good example for the students who we're seeking to serve. So one, we need to stop and eliminate those personal attacks. Also, we need to understand, as you said, that the governor has signed this into law. It's law now. So how do we move forward? How do we move from the past to what we're dealing with now and in the future? We have to like work together. This it is what it is. And so what we're most interested in is positive conversations with a diverse group of stakeholders. We're fine with that, who can come together and like really work to move this thing forward. We've got some, there's some really like specific expectations that the legislation has put into place. And so we've got work to do, but it's going to take all. And so I just think we have to stay focused on the parents. One other thing I think that has been we've kind of ignored, quite honestly, are the parents. 61% of families in IPS geography are choosing charter or innovation schools. The vast majority. So who are we or anyone else to ignore or diminish the desires of those parents? I want to admit and acknowledge that change is hard for everyone. There are folks who are conflicted about this. There are folks that are hurt by this. There are folks who are angry. I would never like diminish those feelings. But what we have to keep at the forefront are the people who are choosing these options and and honoring what we can do, honoring their choices and working to create solutions to like benefit and level the playing field for all folks. And so we have to kind of evolve our thinking just as the education landscape has evolved. So Indianapolis in general it's a city of options. There are 11 school districts.
Hmm.
That's not even including charter schools.
Hmm.
How is it fair to honor and have a subset of those students who are in those 11 school districts have access to resources, but not other students? And so again, let's just level the playing field and let's just honor the parents. That's just been front and center. We've largely ignored that, and we have to acknowledge that. So I'm just interested in moving forward. I'm open to having conversations with anyone. I know the Mind Trust it's been like our goal all along, and we're interested in moving forward and unifying. But the contention and the nastiness has to stop.
How, to either of you, do you get that to stop? What is the first um, olive branch that gets extended? Have you guys had a conversation with Dr. Johnson at IPS? Because this bill, while it affects, it's as a statewide law, we're particularly talking 95% in this case, probably about just Indianapolis public schools. Are you guys going to go to lunch or have a conversation? Where do you start? Because yes, it is what it is, but that's the end of the politics side, but it's the start of
Yeah.
something new.
Yeah, I've I have known the superintendent for 15 years. And, during all of that time, I've considered her a friend. She's a strong leader. She is, somebody who actually grew up in the charter school space, right? She was a teacher at a charter school. She was a principal at a charter school. She was the first innovation school officer that worked hand in glove with the Mind Trust and me, quite frankly, to grow the network of innovation schools. So we have nothing but respect for Superintendent Johnson. I have a lot of respect for her personally. And while we might not have seen eye to eye on this, I don't have any question that she has a heart for kids, that she wants what's best for all kids, regardless of school type. And I also have no doubt that she will lead with integrity moving forward and will come to the table, as will we, to figure out, how can we work together to create a system that will work for all kids. And I would say a great example or a great opportunity for all of us is there currently is a bill that is working its way through the last stage of the legislative process that does a couple things. One is it offers up opportunities to figure out new approaches to things like transportation and facilities. And that's been a big goal for the Mind Trust for a long time, to work to increase both access and efficiency for kids. The other piece of that bill creates a local education alliance that will be a 9-member advisory group. Both the mayor and the district have appointments to that group. The mayor will chair. And that's an opportunity, right, for folks on all sides of this, right, and both the school district sector and the charter sector to come together and work through some of these challenges as one. And I think we have an opportunity through that mechanism, which is a mechanism that IPS advocated for alongside the Mind Trust, to really figure out how can we take advantage of this to come up with a plan, right, that gets input from a variety of stakeholders and can be signed on by both the district and the Mind Trust and others in our community, right, to kind of chart a long-term vision around how we're going to work together. So I think we have an amazing opportunity the next 6 or 9 months to leverage that bill to really chart the future, for all of the kids in our community who are worthy and who deserve not just resources, but high quality schools, every single one of them.
I saw you recently have some back and forth about that bill online because that right now is now folded into Senate Bill 373.
Yes.
Um, and you mentioned 6 to 9 months because that is the um, agency, the alliance has an end date.
Yes.
It is only supposed to be temporary.
Yes.
Some of what I saw online was people saying this is mandatory and this is forcing IPS to give up things. And then I saw you saying, no, this is optional and this is what IPS has asked for. And yes, that's true. That's why I've read the bill. But let me ask you this. Is this a bill that says, okay, we're basically, because if we go back to the conversation you and I had, Shannon, it was pretty much you guys having a conversation, and Dr. Johnson said, okay, I'm walking away from the table now. I don't want to go this far. Is this bill, it seems to me, is a mandate come to the table and talk about it, as I would say to the kids, let's talk about it like big kids here. And then if you don't, then the legislature next year could say, hey, we gave you the opportunity to talk amongst each other and figure this out. Now here's what we're going to do. Is that what this is?
Yep. So there's two pieces of the bill, right? One is the facility and transportation piece, which is completely opt-in.
Okay.
Right. So all the people that said it was not opt-in, and they were going to force IPS, just read the bill.
Which I will say from the actual report that this is based off of, there was a report that was created. It has only ever been optional as a pilot program from the beginning.
And we're kind of in a post-truth world where you can say anything and then it spreads like wildfire on social media, right? But just read the bill. That's completely opt-in. In terms of the Education Alliance, this was an idea that the district presented to us in one of our mini meetings in November of last year.
They even named it.
After we had transparently read the district into our legislative priorities, right? And said, let's get to the table to figure out how we can shift these priorities, right? So that they don't create any sort of major threat to the existing system. And we had a lot of very productive conversations leading up to legislative session where we were very transparent about all of that. The Indianapolis Local Education Alliance was IPS's idea as early as November.
Okay.
They then shared that idea during the session with legislative leadership. And we supported it every step of the way. So this was the district's idea. You had legislative leaders taking that idea and incorporating it into a bill, and you had the Mind Trust supporting that. So, anybody who says that that concept is a way to do anything to IPS is mistaken. It was IPS's idea. We support that idea. And I think it's a creative mechanism for folks to work together to figure out what does the school system look like now that we're in this new world and that we're going to be sharing property taxes. And again, it's incumbent upon leaders in the system to put aside their policy differences every once in a while, right? And figure out how we're going to compromise for kids. That's what we hoped the district would do before the session, and that's what we offered to do. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen. But our offer still stands now that the session is almost over, and we have an opportunity to figure this out collaboratively.
And so that offer, point blank, is what?
Let's sit down, right? Everybody has to give. Not everybody's going to get everything they want. And this is an incredible opportunity, actually. Like, we could be the first major city in the country to provide an excellent education to all kids, regardless of race or income or zip code. And sometimes it takes a little bit of challenge, right? A little bit of division to realize the stakes for kids. And then the question is, what are we as adults going to do to overcome that and to get to the other side where we're able to come together and figure out how we're going to give every last kid in our city access to a great education. And the community should know that the Mind Trust wants to be part of that conversation. We know that we're not going to get everything we want, right? But we got to get to a point where we can get past the division to figure out how we're going to serve all kids well.
Go ahead. I was coming to you. Go ahead.
Just to kind of piggyback off that, to get past the division, I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to foster a sense of calmness in a way, and so and to disarm the troops. And I think that could go a long way. I think the district coming alongside of us and others and saying, we acknowledge the hurt, we acknowledge the pain, we acknowledge the disagreements, but let's move forward. Let's stop all of this. I think that's really, really important when you think about all of the negativity and the dangerous attacks. I think that's going to be necessary. It's going to have to be that clear, coming from all parts. In addition to giving, other like really tangible things relative to the legislation and how we're going to move forward, I think we're going to have to call for a sense of calmness from the community. And that's something that we're doing. Like, that's something that the Mind Trust wants, and I hope that that's something that we can get from the district.
Is with that bill 373 and the Education Alliance, it hasn't passed yet. But when does it say you guys have to begin meeting? Because that seems like that would be what the start of what you're asking for.
Yeah, so that will, as long as it becomes law, it will happen quickly. So the first meeting has to happen by July 1st, and a report has to be delivered by the end of this calendar year.
Okay.
There's a 6-month window to do that work, which I like because it creates a sense of urgency, right? And there is a clear deadline that folks need to work towards. And then that report will be delivered to the legislature, to the district, and to the mayor's office, right? So every big stakeholder, right, will receive that same report. And then we'll have an opportunity to respond to the recommendations.
What has passed is Senate Bill 1, and that changes the funding formula. 2028 is when everything is fully funded and everybody's sharing 100%. But now coming to 2025, when does the first dollar get shared with charters?
Yeah, so there was already a law in 2023 that said any new operating referendum has to be shared with charters. it's very likely that IPS will need to go out for an operating referendum
Next
in
year, I believe.
fall of
Yeah.
2026. So that's the first opportunity for a referendum to be shared.
Mm-hmm.
It's also why this education alliance is important,
Mm-hmm.
right? If folks can align on that next referendum, that presents an opportunity to show that we're able to work together,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're able to collectively advocate for something together. So the first opportunity for that would be 2026. And then there was also a law that was passed in 2023. It gets really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
That gives the incremental increase of local property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So for all of you wonks out there, as assessed values rise, which they have a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? That incremental increase is
Mm-hmm.
already shared with charter schools. So this year was the first year where charters got a little bit from local property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a lot,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. That will start to ramp up once we hit 2028 and won't be fully phased in until 2032.
Well, we've heard Dr. Johnson say, um, well, we already know there was going to be a referendum back, was it 20, was that 24? That there was going to be a referendum for rebuilding stronger, but everyone couldn't come figure out how that would look with the operating budget. But now, okay, that's been put on hold while some of the other things are moving financially. 2026 is when they have said, hey, we hit a wall. It is what it is. Charters, no charters. They were going to have to do a referendum, but now that charters are going to be included in that formula, this is why this will be the first time that a IPS referendum would truly impact every student inside the IPS boundary. So I guess we've never seen a referendum like this, and so it'll be. I take it if everybody comes together, I'm going to go do the Education Alliance come this time next year, April of 2026. Every school in the IPS boundary, whether it be a traditional IPS, an independent charter, or an innovation school, should all be campaigning that this benefits all of us.
One opportunity moving forward is exactly what you just said, right? So because property tax sharing is the law and will be phased in, it provides aligned incentives, right, for both public charters and the district to come together to advocate for things that they can agree upon, right? Because there's not going to be the fighting moving forward around how do you split existing resources,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody actually has an incentive now to figure out how they can collectively advocate for a lot of the same things. So I am hopeful that now that we've structurally aligned incentives, that you will see a lot more collaboration.
And I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds, but now with this bill pass, IPS right now is literally right now sharing money, taking it out of their pocket and sharing it with their innovation schools or whoever their partner schools is. But now with this new bill, that money is coming from the state and therefore the county. It never really comes out of IPS's pocket. Is that how this would work?
Yeah, so this really isn't the school district sharing.
Mm-hmm.
It is the formula has been rewritten
Mm-hmm.
so that when the county makes those calculations, now they're just including the charter school
Mm-hmm.
students in those calculations. And to your earlier point, the district would have had to go out for a very large 2026 referendum
Mm-hmm.
with or without this law.
Correct.
The district's own calculations, I'm not given any inside information right now. The district's own public calculations
Mm-hmm.
state that it will run out of money in 2027
Mm-hmm.
without another large referendum or significant central office cuts.
Mm-hmm.
That has nothing to do with Senate Bill 1.
Mm-hmm.
So some people, frankly, will use charter schools as the scapegoat for structural issues that IPS has with or without whatever happens this legislative session. So I think it's very important for us to be clear as we're talking about, funding and charter school policies, many of which won't even kick in until 2028. There is still a structural problem at IPS that they themselves acknowledge, and they will become insolvent by 2027
Mm-hmm.
unless they do something about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that even ups the ante now to figure out how can we collectively figure out a way for that not to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for the system to reinvent itself so that it can continue to serve all kids well. And we're excited. What's going to be the next generation of IPS?
Mm-hmm.
They have an opportunity to be bigger, to be stronger, to have more high quality schools, to have a system that is coordinated, more unified.
Mm-hmm.
And IPS can take the lead on that. But the reality is, any successful organization, as the landscape around them shifts, they have to change too, right? And school districts are no different.
Well, and referendums is nothing that no school district in the state is immune from. Everybody pretty much has to do one at some point because that's the way we've decided to fund our schools, BU Hamilton Southeastern or Wayne Township. But what this new bill does is essentially the all of the charters, which they already are their own municipal corporations, are basically their own school districts. So whereas now, I guess we should probably start thinking of changing the terminology. IPS has been sharing uh, money before, but now it's you've got your pot, and now everybody else gets their little bit of pot. But because we're all in the same geographic area, there's lots of room for collaboration. So that's one way to look at it. But let me ask you guys this: Dr. Johnson has said, "Hey, if this bill passes, we're going to have to close 20 schools." Um, the bill is now passed. We haven't heard from Dr. Johnson yet. The bill just passed just yesterday or the day before. So it takes a little time to figure things out. What do you make of having them to have closed IPS schools? Because as you just mentioned, Brandon, one, you're going to get blamed for that. Um, but is that something that was going to happen one way or another? And other people are also saying, well, if you have to close 20 more schools, doesn't that both sides are saying, well, that creates more opportunity for charter schools, and that could be good or bad. So closing 20 schools.
So, one of the things that has been true throughout these past several months is there has been so much misinformation and manipulation of information, just quite honestly. So, the 20 closing 20 schools, if you recall, and if you go back and all the media and all the things at the school board meetings, IPS school board meetings, the district has said itself, as a part of rebuilding stronger, it was going to have to close 20 to 25 schools as a
Mm-hmm.
part of rebuilding stronger.
Mm-hmm.
That's before any of this, any Senate Bill 1 or anything
That
was
was if they didn't pass Rebuilding Strong.
no, that was as a part of rebuilding,
Okay.
as a part of their changes with rebuilding stronger. And so they to date they've only closed, I believe, 6 schools. 6 schools.
Okay.
And so this is what I mean as far as like a manipulation and a misrepresentation of information. That was something that the district said. But how convenient now during these times to blame it on Senate Bill 1 and charter schools. That's not the case. That was something that they were going to have to do anyway. And so it's unfair to make this an issue that is because of charters or
Mm-hmm.
because of Senate Bill 1. And so I implore, as a journalist, I implore the community to really like focus on the facts. And I understand the emotions of all of this, but we got to focus on the facts, and we have to hold people and districts and systems accountable for the information and the facts that they have previously stated. And so that's a manipulation of information, and I am glad it came about because we have throughout this whole process been really focused on just parents and students and advocating and doing what's best for them. We have not gotten into the mudslinging. We have not said anything contrite or negative about IPS. We do not want IPS to dissolve. And that's important. We do not want IPS to dissolve. We have been focused on the facts. So I implore the community and those who are against this or those who are in support of it to really go back and look at some of those former board meetings, look at some of the media reports. It's all stated there, and so it's important for us um, as we evolve with the times
Mm-hmm.
to also be independent in our thinking and to think objectively and to hold folks accountable for information that was shared previously.
So 20 schools, and you use the term manipulation of information.
Mhm.
Um, what is the truth then?
The challenge on the we will have to close 20 to 25 schools if property taxes are shared with charter schools. And I've seen that reprinted in media story after media story.
Mm-hmm.
I have never seen a journalist ask for the details and the
Mm-hmm.
evidence behind that claim.
Mm-hmm.
It continues to be printed and said in media over and over again as it's the truth without actually understanding the details behind it. And, I don't run the district. I can't tell you, all of the ins and outs of all of their finances. They have very competent, strong leadership, who knows that more than I do. But I haven't heard that claim justified, in particular in the context of sharing property taxes. The Rebuilding Stronger plan had a lot of things that we supported. It had some things that we didn't support. The reality is that the district went into that saying that one of the major objectives was to operate more efficiently. And what happened is that they did close 6 existing elementary schools, and then they reopened 2 massive former high schools that just a few years prior they said they couldn't fill and they had to close them. And those schools were then reopened as middle schools, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars were put into those buildings. So they ended up with Rebuilding Stronger with more square footage than they had going in. They reopened those large, expensive buildings as middle schools. Those schools didn't hit their enrollment targets, which then made them cut $10 million just because they missed their enrollment. And now they're left with these massive buildings that are nearly empty. So I think it's also important to ask those questions, right? And to get under the hood a little bit around the claims that, might be valid claims on the surface, but to blame all of that on charter schools and on property tax sharing is contrary to many of the facts that I just laid out. And there's a lot more, I think, if media started to dig a little bit on these claims, we would have a fuller picture of what the reality actually is.
So Dr. Johnson has said that she would love to see a moratorium on charter schools, because she says, how can we ever properly get a budget and figure out what the future is going to be if basically every year something is getting chopped and taken out and moved, and so the landscape would change again if those buildings, if there are 20 buildings that are suddenly available, do you suddenly get 20 more charter schools? And her point is that that further chops up the pie even more. What do you say to that explanation that we need to halt charter schools so we can let's put a break so we can figure everything out?
First, I have incredible respect for Dr. Johnson, and I have got nothing negative to say about her. I consider her a friend, and I consider her a very strong leader. Okay. What I would say to the claim that the school board and the superintendent have made that we should have a moratorium on charter schools is, one, we are not oversaturated with high quality schools in our community. 2, we just have to look at the district's recent actions. They just launched a ton of new middle schools this school year. They just demolished a building, and as we speak, are building a new school on top of the rubble. So if we're going to talk about charter school moratoriums, we have to be consistent, right? The district is continuing to open up new schools, literally, as we're having this conversation. And then they're telling the charter school community that you can't open up any new schools. So, I think our response is we would never stand in the way of new high quality options for families. We are not oversaturated with high quality schools in our community, far from it. And it's important to be consistent. If we're going to make claims about one side and demands about one side, then we have to make sure that we are exhibiting that same demand on our side, or there is an inconsistency that is hard for me to square.
I would add to that, quite simply, a moratorium on charter schools would be stifling the voice and the choice of parents, Black and brown and low income parents, the vast majority of whom are choosing these schools. So why would we stifle that option? Why would we limit that option to protect a system? That's not fair. That's not equitable. And it's contradictory to what IPS says that it believes in and what it wants. But it will stifle the parents' voice and choice. And we have to keep them front and center. They are making the choices. They are dictating what's going on. They are the reason the education landscape has evolved in the way that it has. And we have to respect that. We have to honor that. We cannot say one thing is fair for one segment of the population that has a very similar demographic, the same demographic as another segment. It's just not fair. If that were the case, why not say, oh, well, since autonomous schools represent the majority of families in this geography, let them get the bulk of the money. So it's important to level the playing field, and it's important to um, be true to oneself and the community in general.
Is there ever is there ever a limit, be it innovation, independent, autonomous, traditional? Is there ever a limit of how many schools can be in one boundary of this district, no matter who's running?
Yeah, nobody wants just to plop down schools for the sake of opening up schools. And the Mind Trust, we've actually shifted our school incubation strategy the last several years. And right now are almost exclusively focused on working with existing high performing operators that have a track record of success to encourage and support them to serve more kids. So we agree, right, that we have to be smart and community centered when we're opening up new schools, but a blanket moratorium with no nuance, with no regard for what our families want and demand, is an ill conceived policy that might have good intentions, but could potentially have extremely negative impacts on families that are locked out of high quality schools and want to have more access to extremely high quality options. The highest performing schools in our city are in demand, right? It's hard to get into some of these schools because
Well,
our families want good schools and they demand good schools and they're school choice savvy. So to say that we can't go to a high performing school that is serving Black and Latino kids well and open up a new campus to serve more kids to meet that family demand, that's something that the Mind Trust would never support.
so I know for an example of what you're talking about would be Victory College Prep,
Sure.
is adding an additional campus.
Sure.
And so it sounds like you're saying that is more the strategy now, the existing schools to expand, add another location in town versus Brown Elementary come
Right.
out of the ground.
100%. And there's nuance to that discussion, right? So if you pass a law that says no new charter schools, that means that what you just said, Victory College Prep, high performing school that has more demand from families than it has seats, is now no longer able to expand its seats. That is an anti family position. I'm not saying that's the intention at all, right? But there are unintended consequences. And we have to think through the negative impact of limiting family choice in a city where we still have far too many high quality schools to begin with.
Moving forward, as you said, 2026 is really going to be the big year. That's the first referendum. So anybody who's inside of the IPS boundary will get to will benefit from that referendum passing. Who is the unit on the charter school side? Is it the Mind Trust who's going to grab all these schools together and say, okay, gang, we all need to get into a room, talk about what it is we want, as well as IPS? Because now we're talking about a whole lot of people instead of just one unit. How does that work?
I think we're certainly willing to work with charter schools to get everybody on board. We're interested in working with the district to get other folks on board, everyone on board as well, and as well as like community stakeholders. I think this task force that's going to have to be established, they'll play an integral part in kind of rallying the troops and figuring out a system and a plan to move things forward. And I'm interested in learning like what that task force will be comprised of, who it will be comprised of. But we're certainly willing.
I think most people probably consider the Mind Trust as the leading um, advocating organization for charter schools. But now, if everybody is their own, they always have been. But now that we're also talking money, is their own municipal group. Is there a charter school alliance that can help everybody say, okay, as collective, this is what we need to make sure we have?
Yeah, so there is a relatively new group that is called the Indiana Charter Innovation Center,
Okay.
which is serving as kind of the state association
Okay.
for all charter schools across Indiana. And they do have a role to play here. I think that there are a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders that have a role to play. The Mind Trust sometimes gets viewed as, you know, the school choice organization that has all of this power, all this influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, our job would be so much easier if we had a fraction of the power that certain people ascribe to us.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders who I think collectively have a responsibility, right, to make sure that we're bringing folks to the table and that we're leveraging our relationships in the charter community, right, to make sure that we're thinking about the common good. That's us, and it's a lot of other folks. And we get excited about working in coalition with partners,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nothing can be done just because the Mind Trust said it could. At the end of the day, we are a nonprofit organization. We have to work with others. And I think through that scale of a lot of people with a lot of perspectives working together, that's where the power comes from, right? And then we can all figure out, what's the vision. We're not all going to get everything we want, right? But if we can be one part of a broader solution, that is exactly the role that we're excited about playing.
Shannon, for you, I know you. This is something that has become near and dear to you. Um, I guess I feel like people could use more education on how this whole system works because it is difficult to understand what is an innovation school,
Hmm.
what is a traditional school, what is a autonomous school, and if everybody at some point in 2026 is what I keep thinking about is going to come together. Um, I asked you, how do you get the schools on the same page, but how do you get the public on the same page to understand if you all are coming together and saying, hey, in 2026 we need to pass this referendum? How do you get people to understand what has happened?
I think what we're doing now, having conversations with media and folks like you, I think we need to continue to have conversations with the community. That's something that we've always done and will continue to do. Even throughout, these past several months, we have had conversations to foster that education. And what we found is that most people support charter schools and they still support IPS too. And
Mm-hmm.
that's good. It can be both and. What we realized to
So
your
it
point,
is both
it
and
is
now.
both and. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And so what we realized, to your point, is that there's just a lack of understanding. And so we will continue to have those conversations. I am willing to meet with anyone and educate them about charter schools and innovation schools and what I know about the district. What is important is for us to come to those meetings with a willingness and an openness to learn, um, and to be receptive to like tough questions, which we are often subjected to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're certainly willing. We have these informational meetings all the time, not only like one-on-one and small group meetings, but we're having a meeting next week actually, and we've had a series of these meetings beyond the bell that foster understanding about education in general, not just charter schools, but the education landscape in general. So I encourage folks to come to our website and check out all of our events and initiatives. But I'm certainly open to having conversations in the community. Really, truly, the contention and the negativity is really a small group of people,
Mm-hmm.
a very small group of people who are very loud.
Loud. Yeah.
Most people overwhelmingly support IPS and they support charters. They support choice for parents. They support like what's best for parents. And I think we can't lose sight of that. We cannot get distracted by the small group of folks who are trying to cause contention and foster a spirit of fearfulness. We have to focus on, the majority. We have to focus on the students, but we're willing to have those conversations. We're willing to do those conversations in collaboration with IPS. I think that'll be important too,
Mm-hmm.
for us. It could be a really great way to demonstrate how we're unifying. It could be a great way to walk the walk and talk the talk. Let's join forces and let's go in collaboration in the community and focus on the future. Acknowledge the past, but focus on the future and
Mm-hmm.
moving forward by fostering deeper understanding.
Well, and I know one of the things that I hear from people, and even some of the people who are loud, some of their concerns are legit to try to understand. And I was going to bring this up way at the beginning, but it was taxation without representation. I hear both sides use that term now, and I know that's one of the first places you guys are going to have to educate, but also. Um, I get when people say this is taxation without representation because I vote for my school board in my district. I vote for that person
Mm.
up there on that board. And if they're not doing what they're doing, I get to vote that person out. I, I think some charter schools are. the concern is how maybe loose or soft it can be with the books and the accountability of the money. And now they're getting my tax dollars. How do we make sure that they are spending it the right way?
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
But on the taxation without representation front, right? The core of that argument is that a school district has an elected school board,
Mm-hmm.
and a charter school does not.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Who is the authorizer of the vast majority of charter schools in our city?
The mayor's office.
The mayor of Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Is the mayor of Indianapolis directly elected by citizens of our community?
Correct.
Cameron, who do you think, or when you ask just, kind of your average citizen,
Mm-hmm.
right, to name the mayor of Indianapolis, you think that the majority of people could probably name him?
Yeah.
You think that the majority of people could name a single member of their school board?
No.
That's my answer. There is a singularly directly elected
Mm-hmm.
leader of our city
Mm-hmm.
who is ultimately in charge of the charter schools.
Now, while I hear you, can we agree that those are two different ways that things work? They're
Sure.
not wrong, but they are different.
So, and then, because you asked the question,
Mhm.
right? If we extend this argument further,
Mhm.
do public libraries have elected school boards?
No.
Do
They
they,
have
do
an
they
appointed
receive
board.
local property tax dollars?
They do.
Okay. Do public hospitals have elected school boards?
No.
No. I could go on if you want.
Okay.
Okay.
I see where you're going.
This is a selective argument
Mhm.
that is applied in this context and then is selectively not applied in every other context.
Okay.
That the same people using the argument in K-12 would never make in those other areas.
Okay.
So again, let's be consistent. Okay.
So-
there is public money going to public institutions
Mhm.
every day, the billions of dollars in our state,
Mhm.
towards real vital services like libraries and like hospitals
Mhm.
that
It's true.
do not have elected school boards.
So,
And the charter schools in this city have a directly elected mayor of Indianapolis
Mhm.
overseeing them. I would say that that is very consistent with democracy.
should the mayor then, I guess the question is, should it be the same process? I don't know which one is better or worse, but should it be the same process? So should the mayor then should we not have elected school boards? Should it be either or?
So then there's also a couple of school districts in our state that don't even have elected school boards.
Okay.
I don't hear anybody calling to defund those school districts.
Which ones are those?
Muncie and Gary.
True, because they're run by the state right now.
Right?
Mhm.
So they have appointed boards.
Mm-hmm.
There's no direct election.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't the folks calling for the closure and the defunding of charter schools, calling for the closure and the defunding of Muncie community schools and Gary community schools? Again, let's be consistent. If we're going to throw out these arguments, let's apply them consistently across the board. They're not being applied consistently across the board. When folks say, why is the Mind Trust not banging the table to expand the pie? Okay. You read the news yesterday. $2.4 billion structural deficit in our state. Okay. The pie is not expanding, folks. And the same people who tell the Mind Trust to go do that and to expand the charter grant, right, that currently is a small stand-in for the fact that charter schools don't receive property taxes, those same people have been against the charter school grant until now it conveniently fits their argument to expand the pie. So again, let's have the policy debate. But if we're going to throw out accusations for charter schools, let's make sure that you're extending that policy consistently to systems that you do support.
Okay, let me ask you this because we're about out of time. And Kateri thought we were only going to talk for 20 minutes. I was like, that's not going to happen, Kateri. On the level of consistency, I hear everything you said. You're good. You're good. But when it goes back to the mayor of Indianapolis with the charter board, you also have other entities that can authorize. Should it just be the mayor then to authorize schools in Indianapolis?
Yeah. So the Mind Trust has been clear since our founding. We were co-founded by a sitting mayor of Indianapolis. We think that the structure of mayoral authorizing is the best single structure in the entire country. Okay. We are fans of mayoral authorizing. There's been now over 2 decades of 3 mayors of 2 parties that have been excellent charter school authorizers. With Mayor Hogsett chairing this local education alliance and appointing the majority of members, we think that he has a fantastic opportunity to take a leadership role in education. And let's have the policy conversation about authorizing in that context. And I will just tell you today that we think that the model of mayoral authorizing is a good one with a long track record and gives direct control to the citizens and direct influence in terms of how it's being done.
And we've also got the Indiana Charter School Board. Do, if the argument was stop letting them do schools in Indianapolis, what would you say?
Yep. So at this moment, we don't support a restriction on charter school authorizing. We think that that conversation needs to be had in concert with a broader conversation about where the system is going. And we do think the policy conversation about charter authorizing is an important one to have, but we think it ought to be had within the broader context of everything else that needs to be figured out. And if it is happening in concert with all of that, let's have the conversation. Let's figure out what is the role for authorizing in this really complex landscape. But I don't think it serves anybody well to have that conversation in isolation, to have charter school moratorium conversations in isolation, if we're not figuring out how that fits into a broader picture.
And this idea just popped in my head while you were talking. If the mayor of Indianapolis is one of the places that doesn't control um, their schools, their public schools, like Chicago public schools or New York public schools. Our 11 school districts are run by their superintendents and their school boards. But the charter schools they're really their own school district now. And as you were saying, much of it is authorized by the mayor's office. Is it too much, or would it make sense? Is it unnecessary? I don't know. This just popped in my head that there would be a city mayor's office school board, because he has the mayor's office of innovation.
Yeah, there are a lot of governance models for school districts across the country that I think would be worthy of investigating as these conversations are happening. So I wouldn't put anything off the table, right? I think everything ought to be on the table as we're having these conversations the next 6 to 9 months. And I think school district governance alongside of authorizing ought to be on the table, right? And let's have a community conversation around what the best structure is, not to protect a system that has not served marginalized kids well for generations, but what is the right structure look like so that every single student, all 45,000 public school students who live within IPS, get access to the best possible school, right? And if we keep, as Shannon says over and over again, if we keep the students and families at the center of our decision making and not the adults and the systems, I think we're going to be much better off.
We will have to leave it there because we are out of time. We talked for a whole hour. I don't know if you realize that, but we did. But there's much more. We're getting into what the future is. I think we started a good conversation about how we got here, where we are right now that this bill is freshly signed. But I guess the conversations about what the future could be at this point are endless. So Shannon, Brandon, thank you for coming on. Thanks for coming in and explaining where you guys stand on what the state of education in Indianapolis and charter schools. And I guess now we all need to get Dr. Johnson. We can all sit around the table here. We'll add a fourth square here, and we can all talk about what the future of that is going to be. I'm certainly going to reach out to her, and I know that you guys will be working on that as well.
Sounds great.
All right. With that said, that's going to do it for this edition of Fox 59 Tonight. I'm Cameron Ridle. We'll continue more conversations like this on my radio show on Sunday morning on 106.7 WTLC and Hot 100.9. For now, we thank you for joining us. The news at 10 and 11 coming your way here on Fox 59 now.